Good afternoon.
Howdy.
I'm Lewis Black. I'm one of the directors of South by Southwest, and I'm doing the Q&A. And this is John Dean, one of the co-writers and co-producers of this movie. And I think we owe him another round of applause for this extraordinary movie. Let me just start, and we'll open up to questions from the audience, but let me start by asking you, what's the update? What's happening with Michael Morton? What's happening with Norwood? What's happening with the people involved?
Michael got married about 3 weeks ago to a woman named Cynthia in Kilgore, and he was the happiest groom I've ever seen in my life. Most grooms look a little nervous or a little ill. Michael was beaming from ear to ear. And I don't think he thought he had a lot of time to waste looking for the next wife, but she's a wonderful woman. Last week, Mr. Mark Allen Norwood was convicted of murdering Christine. The defense lasted about an hour. There is stuff that was not presented any forum that you know when you're researching something like this. And it's like all the murders that we know that he committed, and I know of a couple more that he did, were committed the same MO, a woman alone in bed, beaten to death with a blunt object. There is no sexual issue here. He didn't rape them, and they all occurred on the 13th of the month, you know, which to me made him the Triskaideka killer, but that hadn't had any purchase in the media yet. And then Judge Anderson's inquiry, which you saw some of the end of, he is going to, the results of that should come down, I think, on the 18th of this month. So we'll recut the ending again when we find out what goes on with the judge. But that is where we are now. Michael is going to be there for that, and then he's going to go on a delayed and, you know, well-deserved honeymoon.
How did you guys, I mean, this is an extraordinary story. How did you guys get interested in originally and research it, and who brought who on board?
This was originally, how it came to me was on a Saturday night at about 10 o'clock in September of 2011. I got a text message on my iPhone that said OMG, and it was from Nelly Gonzalez, and he's a TV personality in Houston who was having dinner with John Rayleigh and suggested that, wow, we've got something we can do with. So I really didn't know who Michael was or what the issues were at the time, so I looked it up and was struck as a writer by several things. One, you had good guy, bad guy, and a resolution. But when I found out that he had rejected a parole because he would not give up his innocence, I was just like, you know, no guilty man would do that. And then once you met him, and he is what you see there. And so I knew immediately that we needed a documentary filmmaker of some talent and integrity. And I didn't know any of those guys, so I called Al Reiner. And Al worked like a Trojan on this film. He really did. He came in from LA. He got a lot of very, very good Texas craftsmen, and we wanted pointedly to make this a Texas project. It was a Texas story. And that is pretty much how we got into it. And then we had some lucky things. Being able to shoot in the actual courtroom where he was convicted was not really planned. It was a stroke of luck. And it's a project that had karma from the beginning, and it never seemed to fade. It just seemed to gather. And you know, and like I said, the South by Southwest showing was phenomenal. And I'm really happy to show it here in my hometown.
Great. Are there any questions from the audience over there?
John, I'm curious to know how Whether you talked to any of Christine's family and why were they not more represented in this film? And what they did have to say if you talked to them.
Right. Christine's family, as you might imagine, is extraordinarily conflicted with this whole thing. Michael's son was conflicted. We had a very difficult time convincing him to go on camera with any of this. And you have to look at it from his standpoint. All of a sudden, in a month or two, everything he knew about his father turned out to be 180 degrees from the truth. You know, not only was he not a perverted killer of his mother, but he was actually kind of an extraordinarily brave man. And Christine's family, they are kind of still not come to grips with it. Christine's mother says she will not forgive Michael unless Norwood actually confesses, which he's not going to do. And you know, it's awkward for them, and I think that's just, they didn't want to be part of it, so they're not. And we weren't going to try to force them or ambush them or do anything. I think it was important for us to tell this story because it is, you know, at the risk of sounding a little silly, this is about truth, justice, and the American way. And we didn't want to tell it with a whole lot of hyperbole. I think it stands on its own without any of that kind of stuff. So that's what, you know, that was kind of long-winded answer.
I think good answer. Any other questions over there?
That Michael Morton was innocent, but as a filmmaker, I feel like it's to your advantage to really sell it, and I don't want to say beef it up or overplay it, but you know, when he's sitting there, he spoke very gracefully, very comfortably, very sincerely. Was he coached at all? Do you guys plan topics that he was supposed to discuss? Was he given questions in advance?
The process of this was, we wrote about every question we could think of to ask him that was pertinent. And we wanted to tell Michael's story. We're not trying to tell a dissection of the legal case here. Right. We're trying to tell his personal tale. And so we wrote down questions. We sat him down over a few days in that courtroom, and we asked him, and we got the response. Now, Michael has had a long time to consider his fate. He's had 25 years. He's very smart. He's very well educated and obviously very erudite. So he is his own best advocate. And because he has had so much time to consider what's happened to them, sometimes he even sounds a little scripted to some people, but it's not. That is what we get. That's who Michael is. And he is, as I described, the most extraordinary, ordinary person I've ever met.
Thank you.
He was at the Q&A that I did with this film in Austin, and he is an extraordinary person. I mean, the kind of charisma, the calm charisma that comes across on the screen comes across in real life, and he is so articulate and seemingly at peace with himself in a remarkable, I mean, a visceral way. He was a remarkable person. Over there? Yeah, I'm sorry.
And he is exactly like that. It's amazing.
What you see there is what you get 24/7. And he is, you know, I feel honored to be able to tell his story. I really do. And I want to thank my wife because every other film I've been involved with over the last 20 years, she refused to have anything to do with because she thought they were kind of stupid. But she turned her, you know, she came into this and did all the logistics, did the accounting, did everything, and really threw herself into it. And now she's done working at trying to get the story out in front of people. And I thank her. Al, of course, worked like a Trojan. Marcy Garriott in Austin has been an extraordinary help in getting this out. We had great, you know, we had so many people give their time for next to nothing or, you know, just for expenses that were, you know, the talent in Austin really got behind us, and I don't know what to tell him except thank you. I mean, that's kind of pale and, inadequate, but that's all you can do. And this has been absolutely the best project of my life.
Okay, my question is, what are the plans for the future for the film? I would love to have friends. I'd even love for my children to see it.
This is the second time it's shown in a public venue. We showed it at South by Southwest, and like I said, we got a remarkable response. We are planning on showing it at the Human Rights Film Festival in New York in June. That gives us time to re-edit the ending. And then we will start showing it more in more venues, Houston, here, there, and everywhere later on this fall, and see who picks it up. We don't really know what the final outlet for this is going to be because this is still kind of in its infancy.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious legally if you know how it works. I mean, is it really like the defense has no access to, say, the prosecutor's file unless they file for? I mean, at the time of the trial, how does that work? Do you know?
I didn't quite hear that.
Did you understand?
The question was,
I can restate it.
How does discovery work? What rights does the defense have to
At
see
the time of the
material-
original
at the
trial,
time
too.
of the original trial, what rights does the defense have to see
right.
what the prosecutor has?
The legal end of this case really has to do with what they call the Brady Law. And it's a legal ruling in Brady versus Maryland, which basically says if there's anything potentially exculpatory to the defense that is in the files of the prosecution, that they are obliged to turn it over. In some venues in Texas, they have what they call open files, which means the defense can see anything that's contained in the prosecution's file. In Williamson County, they didn't have that, and it was really up to the prosecutor's discretion to determine what was, relevant and what wasn't relevant, who, to me, just in terms of common sense, is the very last person you'd want to do that in terms of fairness. And there is legislation pending that would change that, but of course the moment that hit the legislature floor, they've kind of bastardized it. Now that the people that are for prosecutors, want, well, if we have to turn over our files, the defense should turn over their files, which to me seems to be totally out of sync with the notion of attorney-client privilege. But in this case, and things that we didn't present, like I said, we didn't want to do a dissection of the legal end of it. Things that they didn't put Don Wood on because they would have had to disclose what was in his files. The judge asked to see what was in those files, and Anderson did not show that. He sent the judge a summary. And the judge ruled, based on the summary that he had, that there was nothing in the files that was pertinent to Michael's defense. So all of the subsequent appeals referred back to that decision that you can't appeal because it's already been ruled on. But the judge didn't know that he was being flim-flammed as well, which is why Anderson is in such trouble now, because he's got immunity from anything he did to Michael, but if he lied to the judge, if he withheld evidence, he can be held in criminal contempt, and that's what will be ruled on later this month.
Is that summary part of what was brought up in his trial? That
No.
Really?
Not in any concrete terms that anyone could make a ruling on. And the other thing is just there's some common sense issues in this too. If you are the investigator, and Boutwell is famous, he's the guy that interviewed Henry Lee Lucas when he was confessing to all 900 of his supposed murders. So Boutwell's a little bit of a chump. But if you see the preponderance of this, you would at least ask yourself a question like, well, maybe I should investigate this. And according to Michael's brother, The investigation ended that afternoon, that they never looked again. So, you know, there's a little of that goes on with this as well. There's plenty of stupidity involved in this. It is what you hope to mitigate by setting the system up in a certain way.
Okay, let's take one more question.
Were you, were you present, or anybody you know present, at the hearing for, of Anderson? And what's your sense of what will happen to him?
My wife and I definitely are gonna go for that. I think my son wants to go too. Morton, I mean, what you get in we've got three themes basically running through this whole film. One is transcendence, which is Michael's story, and redemption, which is also Michael's story. But you also get arrogance and ambition, and that is who this person was, Anderson. He had the ambition to be a judge before he was 50, and he achieved that ambition, and now we know what lengths he was willing to go through to achieve that. You've seen him on the film, again, as is Michael. Is that who Michael is? That's who Anderson is. Will they be willing to, you know, find against him? I think the political pressure that's being applied right now is probably going to have a lot of effect on that. I wouldn't be surprised. Will he ever go to jail? No. Will he lose his job? Probably.
Thank you very much. This is, and once again, what a great and important film.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Liz.